I think it's convenient now. I mean, we are honestly in a campaign season, and this is a popular topic, and it does sell well with the public. Obviously, the public wants as much transparency in their government and their subdivisions of government as they can possibly get. So it's a winning argument on the campaign trail. Like I said previously, there was no lack of opportunities for people to support transparency issues in the last session. We had several bills. Mine was obviously the first one out of the gate, and a very comprehensive piece of legislation, but once it got out of committee on the House side, of course it made through our chamber with unanimous support. Once it got out of committee on the House side, it could have been brought to the floor at any point. And they elected not to do that, which was very disappointing. But now, I guess they've had a change of heart, which on one hand, I'm glad that they do. We're looking at this transparency as an important issue. But on the other hand, I'm disappointed that they didn't support it last year when it was primed to be promoted and to pass and be law by now. So his bill is a lesser version, if you will, than mine. It doesn't have a lot of the requirements that my bill had. So we'll see. I mean, we'll file another transparency bill, and we'll see which one the General Assembly supports. We'll see which one the public actually supports, because now transparency is a household term. And we'll see how much transparency the public actually wants, how much transparency the taxpayer wants.
Now, do you think this opens the door for compromise when it comes to a transparency bill? If you do file another one like Senate Bill 2, do you think that this opens the door for a more serious conversation on passing that type of legislation?
Well, oddly enough and interestingly enough, I had a compromised version that I was willing to, concede some of my issues and put out a compromised version and would have been happy for that to pass. So when we talk about compromise, that opportunity was available as well. So I'll start out basically with the same language that I started with last year with Senate Bill 2. And, if we need to compromise, we may crack the door open a little bit on that. But the compromised version was available last year as well.
Now, recently there's been kind of a renewed focus on investment returns, investment experience, especially in light of some recent stories about the KRS board. Will that change anything in terms of the language of your legislation? And also, do you think this changes the conversation in any way about what needs to be done?
Well, investment returns in an indirect way was a part of my legislation because it required people with more investment experience to be part of the board makeup. And obviously we need as much expertise in that area as we can possibly get, because returns have been disappointing. They've not measured up to what the assumptions say they should be. So when we're not getting the returns that the assumptions say that we should be getting, we're falling further and further behind. My transparency bill, again, addressed that in some measure because we asked for more qualified people in the investment field to be part of the process.
Now, there's been some news stories about doubling down on bad investments by KRS, though. So is there any new legislation that could address those problems or anything like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, but those decisions, some of that is just 2020. Hindsight is always 2020. And, were bad decisions made? We can't, probably, but we can't do anything about that now. So we have to look out the windshield and not the rearview mirror. And we have to assure ourselves that we are going to make better decisions down the road than we've made in years past. And obviously there's been a lot of concern about hedge funds and the high risk of hedge funds, and particularly the high fees that are associated with hedge funds. And so hedge funds have gotten a bad connotation recently. Well, it's not so much the hedge fund concept with me as the high fees that are associated with hedge funds and how much we were actually paying for those fees. It might have been, in all honesty, that hedge fund might be a good strategy, but what's it costing us? What are those fees and who are we paying them to? That's the argument that I made the whole time. Not so much the hedge fund, strategy. You can make your own decisions. The public can make their own decisions whether that's a valid investment or not. My concern was how much they were costing me, who was getting the fees, how much were they, and that part of it.
Do you have any other pension issues that you want to address during the 2017 session?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, there are. One, the transparency component. I think we'll probably go back with that. And then another one that I'm really probably not at liberty to discuss right now because I don't have the language for it drafted yet, but I think there is cause for concern on how we combine some of the systems, and I'll kind of leave it at that. Should we perhaps split some of these systems up and not put them all in one basket, so to speak? So I think we can take a look at that.